Hey guys, hope you're doing okay. So I recorded this video actually today, so it is Thursday, and our first exam is tomorrow. But in any case, this is a short intro to a very long video. So this video is a sort of podcast with someone who is currently a fifth year, is in between fourth or fifth year, a medical student at Imperial. Those of you that are at Imperial will know him. His name is Muntaha. And he very kindly took the time out to do this kind of podcast thing with me, where we spoke. He's the current ICSM SU President, which is the Imperial School of Medicine Student Union President. So just some kind of quick, any like kind of key things I thought were really interesting, I'm just going to share with you up front, and then you guys can watch, if you have the time. So first was like one of the things I didn't know was that when you're doing your clinical year at Imperial, which is in fourth year, if they don't offer a BSc that you are particularly interested in, you can actually move to another uni and do a year somewhere else. And actually not a lot, but quite a few students apparently come to Imperial from other unis during your clinical years. During your BSc year. So he himself done Cancer Frontiers, which is one of the BSc, and he said half the people on his in his sort of group, in his cohort, were actually from other unis. So it was kind of like moving sixth form, which was really interesting. One of the other things he pointed out was a lot of people that he done his BSc with, actually half of them ended up doing the MB PhD program, which, if you don't know, is worth checking out if you're interested in research, just to read a little bit about it. It's basically doing a 3-year PhD in between, whilst you're doing medicine, basically. It's between your clinical and preclinical years. With the student union role, it's a full year out, and he spoke a lot about, the things that he's found interesting in the role. I mean, towards the end, we discussed kind of one of his things that I think he was a bit bothered by, and frankly, it's appropriate, I think, was that the Faculty of Medicine at Imperial have recently sort of created this little trend of taking decisions or making decisions about the medical school without actually taking into consideration the opinions of medical students. And of course, like, when things affect, like we're a big stakeholder in that decision. So for example, he spoke about St. Mary's, one of the buildings being closed down, and this year, with the Alexander Fleming building on the South Kensington campus, they really want to move students out of there. So that's more towards the end. He's done loads of societies through the years, and he spoke and gave some really good advice about how to get on board, how to get sort of positions on committees and things like that. And especially like getting something like the president of the student union. He mentioned how it's important to kind of do things, small things in your early years, so that you can build up the relevant experience, so that when you apply for the big roles, people can kind of have some trust and confidence that you'll be able to sort of manage all of that, which I thought was really good as well. It was a really interesting kind of discussion. So yeah. If you guys want to watch, go ahead and give it a watch or a listen, however you do it. Obviously, if you have exams, I have an exam tomorrow. Do not waste your time. I mean, like 5 minutes in between revision here and there is okay, I guess. I mean, I'm not lecturing you on how to revise or anything. But yeah. If you don't have exams, then feel free to listen, and hopefully you find it useful. I will timestamp it. I don't think it will be timestamped when I upload the video, just because I have an exam tomorrow. But yeah, more of these coming up soon. So yeah, without further ado, I hope you guys enjoy, and see you in the video. Okay, hey guys. So today I have Muntaha. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah, Muntaha, whatever works.
Okay, whatever works. So any version of Muntaha, so Muntaha, it's good. Is it Muntaha Naeem?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You're what year are you in right now?
So I would be in my 5th year, but yeah, it was part of my role. I'm taking the year out.
Yeah. Okay. So Muntaha he's done 5 years at Imperial so far in his 5th year. Obviously a medic. Many of the people watching this will know that Muntaha is the president of the ICSM U. Is there a U at the end?
There's an SU. It's a weird acronym. ICSM SU, Imperial College School of Medicine Students Union. It's a bit of a mouthful.
Yeah. Okay, we'll just go ICSM SU. So there you go. I've learned something new today. Okay, so yeah, he's obviously the president. Muntaha, I recall actually. So when we started this year, we obviously because of COVID, which we'll come to. Everyone hates COVID. We'll come to that. But yeah, so in the beginning of this year, we had only a little bit of time on campus. We had like 2 weeks introductory. So obviously I'm first year, so we only had like 2 weeks of introductory teaching. My cohort, which is like 400 people, were broken down into 4 different groups. So our group was based at Charing Cross. And I honestly remember it like it was yesterday when you guys from the student union came down. And I remember you standing at the front, and I remember you telling us that, listen, if there's ever like a police caution, then don't accept the caution, man. Like,
Yeah,
you gotta come to us. And I thought, like, that's the first time I'd ever heard that. So can we
yeah.
start there? Why is that a thing? Like,
Why
what?
is it a thing? Yeah. So that's like the one bit of advice which is always given every single year. It's literally the first thing that you learn in medical school is
Yeah.
don't accept a police caution. And the reasoning for that is if you're a student, particularly in Freshers Fortnight, it's, you know, you're new to university, you want to go out and you want to see things and do things. And sometimes students can do stuff which is a little bit naughty and the police can be called or can get involved.
Mhm.
And the problem is that as a medical student, there's certain extra checks and things that we have to go through when we go to certain wards, when we start our jobs. And it's all overseen by the GMC, which is the big, I don't know what you call it, the regulatory bodies of all medics. And there's certain checks. So normally a police caution is just a kind of slap on the wrist. If you do something bad, the police will say, oh yeah, don't worry, we won't formally arrest you or anything. We'll just give you a police caution. It will be on your record, but you know, it won't mean anything. Normal DBS checks won't show it up. But as medics, we go through an enhanced DBS check, and police cautions can come up and they can be kind of investigated. And what you don't want to do is get to the end of your degree, or you don't want to get to 5th year, have an enhanced DBS check, and suddenly a police caution comes up, which is used for medical school. So what you want to do is you want to report it right at the start, and then the medical school can help you through basically figuring out exactly what it is that's happened, whether or not there is a caution on your record, and then how to navigate that situation. And it's always better to do it earlier on rather than later, because there have been instances where people haven't reported it and then it comes up, you know, as you graduate, and that's the worst time. You want to make sure that everything is all sorted early on, the medical school is aware of it. So yeah, it's one of those weird things. It's like, it's the one thing you're told, and I'm glad you remember it, and I hope others remember it as well.
Yeah.
But you know, there's reasoning behind it, basically.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that makes absolute sense now. Yeah. I remember just thinking, like, up till that point in my life, I'd never heard that ever before. I mean, I'd done so much research before coming into medical school. Like, you know, I'd read every student forum, everything pretty much, as I'm sure most medical students do. But I never heard that don't accept police caution, like being like a central tenet of like a sort of rite of passage into first year of medical school. So yeah, okay, thanks for breaking that down. We'll come to obviously your role as the president of the Students' Union, which, as you alluded to, you take a year out to do. So it's not like some small. It's not, well, no role is too small or anything, but this is it's one with a lot of responsibility because you're taking a whole year out to carry out your duties. We'll come to that, but I want to start at something that we were just talking about before we started this recording. So you mentioned that you done the cancer. I don't know the full title of the BSc.
Cancer Frontiers.
Cancer Frontiers, that's it. Okay, so first of all, I'm just curious, just for myself actually, how was that? How was 4th year? How was doing Cancer Frontiers?
It's really interesting. The 4th year as a whole is really interesting. So I did the first year of Cancer Frontiers. I was the first cohort to do it because it was a new BSc that was introduced. Yeah. And in honesty, I think the reason I did it was because of I was torn between doing management or doing cancer. I ended up going to cancer for a few reasons, but I always enjoyed the cancer teaching we were given in 2nd year, and it's a potential career option as well. It was really interesting because we had a quite small cohort of just 14 of us, and it was split 50-50. 7 of us were internal students, 7 of us were externals. And even the internals, I didn't really know any of them. The externals, obviously, then knew. So it was almost like going into this new, you meet loads of new people, you're in a new cohort. And so it was really nice being able to get to know them, to bond with them, almost becoming like a really tightly knit circle, which is not something that I'd really had in previous years. I mean, with the new, I mean, you were saying earlier that with the new curriculum in first year, you're in groups and you've got cohorts. With the old curriculum, it always used to be big 300-person lectures was how most of the teaching was done. And so it was the first time that we were ever in a very small collective kind of cohort. And so that was really nice. I think fourth year as a whole is in a weird place because you do your first, well, this was my experience. You do the first 2 years of medicine, which tends to be a lot more preclinical focused. And then towards the end of second year, they start to introduce research elements. There's a module called CRI, which is all based around research. So you're in a really preclinical research mindset at the end of second year.
Yeah.
And you want to do more research stuff. But then third year comes along, and then suddenly you're thrown into the wards. And it literally feels just like that. My experience was third year is like you're chucked onto the wards, you're given a list of like 300 medical conditions you have to learn, and they basically go, all right, good luck, have fun, we'll see you in 8 months for your exams. And it takes a bit of time, obviously, to get used to that new mode of learning. But by the end of the year, you really get into this clinical mindset where you really enjoy going around speaking with patients, the proactive nature of third year, and you want more clinical teaching. And then suddenly you're thrown into fourth year, and it's like you're going back to where you left off in second year of having more preclinical focused teaching. It's very didactic in the form of a lot of it was lectures. You're not on the wards taking histories and examining patients and taking bloods and that fun stuff. And you're back to doing research stuff. So that was the weirdest thing that I found for fourth year. It was going back into that year 2 type mindset, going away from what you do in third year. And then it's weird because by the end of it, you get back into that research mindset, and then you start fifth year and actually know you've got to switch back into the clinical mindset. So there's a lot of swapping and changing, which is, it's just interesting.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess I never thought about it like that. Yeah, like obviously as a first year, I've not really thought about second, third, and fourth year much. Like I'm only thinking about exams and getting through. But yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, just overall, like thinking that not, for example, not all unis have do medicine with a BSc. I know that they've actually, like in the future, they're not like having an extra BSc won't actually add points or something like that. I remember reading that.
Yeah. The VF stuff, that's right. That's on a little bit of a tangent. But yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, like going from, it's sort of zigzagging from one end of the spectrum to the other. Do you think that's partly why they might have changed? Like, because we obviously have a new curriculum. Is that related, or is that just it's the time and they decided that we're gonna do a new curriculum? Do you know? I think that with the new curriculum, essentially, my understanding is that it was a college-wide time of reflection where they basically said to all of the faculties to look at your curriculum, how they could be adapted. The curriculum I did had been in place for a long time, and it was definitely in need of being updated. I think that point I just mentioned about this kind of structure of having more preclinical, and then you have 1 year of clinical, BSc back to clinical. I think that overall structure is similar. I know that with you guys, you do some really fun stuff like CSIs, and they try to make it a little bit less preclinical didactic, a little bit more interactive. You've got like more placements and more GP type stuff, which we didn't have, and I'm kind of jealous of, to be honest, because you also made it early on. But I think the overall structure of having the first 2 years to build up that foundation of scientific knowledge, and then phase 1C will be where you actually go onto the wards, you meet patients, and then you'll have your BSc year. I think that overall structure, you'll probably still find that that's the case. With other courses like UCL, they do it a bit differently. So, and part of me prefers it a bit. So they have 2 years of preclinical, then they do their BSc, and then they go into clinical, and then they just do the 3 years of clinical medicine in a row. and then you're back out onto an F1. I think there's probably an advantage of doing it our way at ICSM, but yeah, I don't know. I'm a bit more inclined to the UCL way, to be honest.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Just to give you context, so we've had like some GP placements through right from first term, actually, if I recall. Towards the end of first term, we would have like one every 2 weeks on a Thursday. And then just now, after our exams are completed, literally the Monday after, we have a 2-week placement in hospital, which up till now we have received no information about. So like where it's going to be or whatever, but it's fine. I mean, I think everyone's focused on exams anyway, so it's not a big deal. And yeah, I agree with you. Like, I know like a lot of unis do this sort of thing differently. Like Cambridge have, for example, 8-week terms, and it's a lot of preclinical and then like clinical later on with not much initially. So yeah, there are probably advantages and disadvantages.
I mean, it's interesting because in our course, if I remember correctly, the only real clinical interactions we had, so we had one placement in second year. We had literally like an individual day of GP just thrown in. But there used to be this module called FCA, which stood for First Clinical Attachment. And that was pretty much the first thing that you do when you joined in first year. And the way that used to work was you used to be paired up with another student and you used to be given a patient who's chronically ill. And the way it was supposed to work and did work is that you would meet with the patient initially in first term, and then you'd kind of discuss a little bit about their condition, their story, their history, and then they'd be like, you'd present it to the rest of your group, and then in second term you'd follow up with them again, and then you'd meet with them in third term again. And that was like, it's a different type of, I guess it's looking at patients holistically. But that was interesting because I remember the patient that I got, I remember going along, I remember meeting him with my friend in a cafe, and it turns out the guy was an author, and we didn't even realize at the time, but we were like, oh cool, you do a bit of writing here and there, that's pretty cool, it's probably like a side hobby type thing. And then at the end he gave us a pre-release, or it was like a draft copy of one of his books which he signed for us, and we were like, oh cool, you've got a book, okay, maybe you're kind of legit, like that's that's pretty big, you've got your own book. And then after we finished meeting him, we said bye and everything. I remember we went back to SAF and we Googled his name just out of interest. And then the first result was, a big picture of him came up, a link to his Wikipedia page. And it turns out the guy's a legit author. He's like proper. I mean, some of his books had been made into films and stuff like that, but he really underplayed it when we met him. And then suddenly, he's got his own Wikipedia page, his own films, all of these books coming out. I've still got the book on my shelf somewhere. I've never actually read it, in honesty. But it was always really interesting. It just shows like the sorts of lives that people have. Especially a lot of patients, which you never really, even like we spoke with him for about 2 hours, we never really got down into all of those details. But yeah, that was the most amount of clinical type experiences that we had in first year. Very jealous of your curriculum.
I mean, to be honest, I'm a bit jealous of you now, because in my head, like when I hear that story, I do think like, like initially when we start the course, they tell us a lot, and it's true that there's a privilege of being a medical student. And a part of that is that you get to see people in vulnerable states. There's an implicit trust, and even like just hearing that story, other than this situation, there's not many other situations where you're just going to meet someone like that and have them, sign a book for you. And so, and to be honest, when you said author, the first time I heard Lufa, I was thinking, what's Lufa? I'm glad I waited, because then you explained it. And I was like, oh, author, okay, that's fine. That's one of those Zoom things. Like in person, I would just ask, I would just stop you and be like, what did you say? I didn't hear that. But on Zoom, you can't be like, I don't want to interrupt your flow and be like, what's a Lufa, man? But okay. Okay, just coming back. So I think one of the things I gleaned from what you were saying earlier is, whilst you were doing Cancer Frontiers, it did feel like almost not necessarily a fresh start, but it did feel quite fresh because it was a new group, and it was a change from previous years, having done clinical in year 3 as well. With the external students, so is that quite common? Like I personally wasn't aware of that. Do a lot of external people come in 4th year?
We get loads of King students. I don't know why, but loads of King's people always come to us. Yeah, we get, I don't know the exact numbers in fairness, but we're not talking 5 or 6, we're talking more about 40, 50 students.
Okay.
A lot of them come to do management, a lot just come to do our science BScs. I guess for them in King's, it's not compulsory for them. So a lot of people definitely used to do it for things like FPass points. I guess moving forwards, it will just be those who have a interest in doing research.
Right.
But yeah, we for us at ICSM, we get a few of our students who go to other places to do their BSc. So you get a choice where if you want to do a BSc that's not offered within Imperial, most of them are offered. But you know, anatomy is an example. One of my friends went to do sports medicine at Bart because that wasn't offered within ICSM. So we get a couple of our students who go to other places. But yeah, we get a lot of Kings and a lot of other people in, which is quite nice. It's nice just to chat with them, hear about their curriculum, their experiences.
Yeah, I mean, like to me, it rings bells of like sixth form, like because I moved for sixth form, so for me it was like it was a new, and I to be honest, I don't know how common it is that people move, but I know it like it does happen. Yeah. Sorry, what were you gonna say?
I was just going to say, yeah, I moved as well for sixth form. I think that felt very different because I don't know, for me moving to another sixth form, it was like I was going into somebody else's space because most of the cohort that I had were all internal students and I was going in as an external. And you know, it's weird because they already know each other, the friendship groups are made. There's that little bit of time to get used to things. I guess we were lucky in cancer because nobody really knew anyone, so it all just happened very naturally. And the fact that it was a very small group, you could just start chatting to people, they would be looking to chat with you. And I guess to some extent it's somewhat similar to what you had as a fresher coming in this year, where you know, everything's a new environment, everyone's sort of in the same boat, but you know, you very quickly sit down, start chatting with the person next to you, finding friends, finding a place.
Yeah. Okay. Right. I'm gonna ask because I like 2 or 3 things have come to mind. So I'm gonna do something that they tell us not to do when we're doing questions with patients. Is supposed to keep every question separate. Don't ask 2 questions in one. That's like a rule. So I'm gonna break that rule. But okay. So first of all, coming back to a little bit of sixth form. So did you always know, like, was medicine always like the thing for you? I'm just curious. The second part is, so I know that you mentioned in Cancer Frontiers earlier on, you were saying that almost half your cohort, so I'm assuming 7 people, went on to do the MB-PhD program at Imperial. I have a feeling from how we've sort of had a conversation so far that you quite like clinical medicine. I could be wrong.
You're not wrong.
Okay, right. So that was going to be like my second part. So the first part is like, did you always know medicine? And the second part, research, clinical, or something else? Like, what do you see in your near-term future? So, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting one, and it's definitely taken me back. I don't think I ever knew medicine was, you know, I think very few people are like medicine, that's what I'm gonna do. It was always the option on the table, and it was always the one I was looking at. But I think that with everything, you want to follow what your passions are, and you want to follow what you love doing. And so when it came around to, you know, doing A levels, picking what A levels I want to do, you know, I was naturally interested in biology and chemistry and maths. They were my top 3 choices of subjects I wanted to do. I also did computing, which was another interest of mine. And it was something I had never done before. But I was really interested in giving it a go and seeing how I found it, what it was like. And I think that I think the decision I ended up making was medicine or computing, because that was ultimately my 2 best subjects, what I enjoyed doing the most at. Medicine, you know, the usual, loved science, loved biology, but then I also loved the people side, the talking side, the, you know, going out, helping. I always did a lot of voluntary work. I used to put myself forwards, loved meeting people, chatting to people. And so it kind of combined all of those elements. With computing, it was something I'd never done, but I was always interested in technology, still am interested in technology. And so I wanted to give it a go and see how I found it. There was some things like the problem solving element, which I thought was cool. The creativity of being able to make something and put it out there always intrigued me. And so I did a computing A level, decided, yeah, this isn't for me. I mean, I enjoyed computing, but I liked it as a hobby, but I could never see it as it being a job or being something I wanted to do day in and day out, because I found it quite tedious. And it's really frustrating when you write out loads of code and then because like one capital letter is in the wrong place, you didn't put a semicolon at the end of this sentence, the whole thing crashes. And I just, it was very tedious. So I started to be drawn into medicine, I think, having kind of experienced the side of computing, gone forward with things like biology.
Okay, yeah.
I think that so on the second question of research, it's really weird because when I was in second year, at the end of second year, like I described, I was in that research mindset. I was ready to do more research stuff and to do it, to do more poster presentations, to be in a lab and be a scientist. But then it was when I experienced clinical medicine, bearing in mind I hadn't really had any real clinical medicine exposure.
At that point, yeah.
At the start, I didn't really like clinical medicine too much because I was in that research mindset. But through doing it over the weeks, over the months, you start to figure out, how a hospital works, how placements work, how you learn on placements. You start to get into the swing of things. And I think towards the end of third year, I really started to enjoy it. And so ultimately, having experienced both the research world and also the world of clinical medicine, I would say the clinical side is what appeals to me a bit more. I like how proactive it is. You can, again, meet people, speak with people. You've got that problem solving aspect. Not to say you don't have that in research medicine, but everything all comes together in clinical medicine a lot more for me. And I think I just click with it a lot more. But yeah, for some people, they ended up doing their BSc year and then finding the other side of things. They did their BSc, they got really into the swing of their projects, and then they ended up going on to do a PhD. For me personally, I did it, I did my project, I enjoyed doing it, but by the end of it, I just felt as if clinical medicine was more a better fit. I was grateful for the opportunity to try out the world of research, dip my feet in, act as a researcher, act as a scientist. But yeah, again, it's the people element, all of those sides that really come together in clinical medicine that clicks for me a lot more.
Sure. Would you say within clinical medicine, do you have any ideas of sort of what specialities at this point? So I'm just curious, obviously you're in, fifth technically, fourth or fifth, in between sort of. Do you feel more firm or resolute about any speciality?
I do, but I also know that a lot of people don't. So I'm thinking down the oncology route, and I think oncology, I love, again, I don't say I love cancer, but I love the field of cancer, as opposed to, the disease. But, I love all of the research and everything that cancer gives as a field. I think that it's one of two things. It's firstly, it's like the field of oncology. I reckon it's probably one of the most difficult and emotionally challenging fields to be in, because you have to break bad news a lot. You see patients a lot. You see them deteriorate. It's very difficult and emotionally challenging. But on the other hand, you also have days where it's probably the best thing ever, where if you cure a patient of cancer, you've effectively saved their lives, and it's a really rewarding field to be in. And I quite like that balance. I don't know why, but the fact that it's really difficult and has some of the worst periods, but also has some of the best, is quite nice. A lot of people, so on specialties, a lot of people come into medical school and they'll think, I want to do this. I want to be a neurosurgeon. I want to be a plastic surgeon. I want to do this, this, and this. I have a friend who came in thinking he wanted to be a cardiothoracic surgeon. He switched about 3 times over during his first 4 years at medical school. He ended up doing endo BSc. I don't know what he wants to do now, but he just switches so much.
Yeah.
I know people who have gone through the whole of medical school, not really knowing what it is they want to do. I was speaking with one of my friends who's an F2. She still has no idea what it is that she wants to do, even at that stage. I think that where you'll you'll slowly start to figure it out when you're on placements. You get a feel of what it's like to be a GP, what it's like to be a surgeon, to be in medicine, and you'll start to gravitate slowly towards one of those. And then I think when you hit 50, you hit final year, you rotate around lots of different specialties, and you start to get a feel of what it is that appeals to you, what it is that maybe you're less interested in. You know, for me, I had a surgery placement and I really didn't enjoy it. I had a medicine placement. I really started to enjoy it. I started to gravitate towards that. So you'll figure it out, and all the pieces will be put into place eventually, is my view on it. I think that people who come in and they know exactly what they want to do, fair enough, but unless you've really experienced the specialty, you've experienced what the day-to-day job is like, it's difficult to make that judgment. Because even with oncology, you can absolutely love the field of cancer. You can love the science behind it. You can love how, you know, the different pathways work. But then when it comes to the day-to-day job of someone in that role, I think that it's often a different story, and there's differences between what you might like in concept and then in practice, what things you start to gravitate towards. That's my kind of take on it.
No, that's that makes a lot of what you said just makes sense. Yeah, I think it's very hard. Yeah, you can't really know until you've had at least a little bit of experience of the day-to-day, not just the the picture that you have in your head of what it will be like, but the actual reality. I guess I feel like you kind of answered this, but I'm still a little bit curious. So within oncology, like I know from like personal experience that there are some, like there's kind of, I'm not going to break it down into two because I don't know enough, but in my head I've got two kind of different things, which is there's the surgery aspect where they, the people that will do the work of removing tumors or taking biopsies and stuff, and then there are the clinical oncologists who formulate the plan of treatment for, like, the chemotherapy and everything. And obviously it's MDT, so it's not one person doing everything, but in my head I have those two as separate things. So first of all, are they separate things? And within those two, like, is there one that you lean on, or is it something else? Like,
I think so. I think they are separate. It's really weird because I feel like the experiences you have in medical school directly correlates with your views of what career it is that you want to do. I.e., you can have a really positive experience in one placement, and then suddenly that becomes a life choice. And then other things, you have a bad experience and then you start to rule them out. So I actually had a really bad surgery placement when I was in third year. And it was the first placement I'd ever done. And I won't go into the details, but I didn't enjoy it. And so naturally, I almost feel like that in itself has made me lean away from surgery. It's made me gravitate more towards the medical route. So that's where my mindset is at the moment. But again, I'm not firm in that decision. I might go into fifth year to final year, have great experiences with surgical oncologists, with other surgical fields, and then suddenly start to move back towards the surgery aspect. But as of right now, I'd say medical is more the one for me.
Okay, fair enough. And I think it's good that you've got an open mind and that you're aware that despite having had a bad experience, it doesn't mean that in the future you might not have another experience that's good. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, last question on cancer, I promise, then we'll move on from cancer. But okay, so I guess having done sort of Cancer Frontiers, the BSc, it feels like a bit of a stupid question, but like, what's the horizons of like cancer look like? Like, how close are we to? I mean, we already can cure some cancers. Like, well, cure. I don't know. I don't know enough about. I don't even know enough about things that I don't know within cancer to make a good question. Yeah. I'm just curious as a layperson.
And I've done a BSc, and I still don't know, to be honest with you. It's just interesting. I mean, you learn about. I mean, obviously, there's so many different types of cancer. Yeah. And even within the BSc that we did, you learn a lot about specific types. My project was on hepatocellular carcinoma and some of the new treatments called immune checkpoint inhibitors and how different factors relate to that. And so that's that's the field and the area that I've seen. But cancer, there's so many different types, some of which we've done really well. They're a lot more curable than they would have been 10, 15 years ago. Some of which particular, types of ovarian cancer, for example, are still, we've got a long way to go. But there's a lot of exciting new technology. And I think a lot of the focus at the moment isn't just on treatment and cures, but also on new biomarkers and how we might identify patients who have cancer before they have symptoms, or at least as early on as possible, because earlier diagnosis means the cancer hasn't spread. It's easier to treat when it's localized. So there's some interesting innovations, and it'll be interesting to see how they progress, but it's still, I think it's very cancer dependent. It depends on the type, and different types, the prognosis varies massively. We've definitely made some good progress in recent times.
Sure. Okay. Okay. Absolute last question on cancer, but I guess this one's a little bit esoterical. But having done the BSc, did you feel like it was at a level that was challenging enough for you as a medical student? Like, was it cutting edge? Because I feel like, no, you go first, and then I'll go. But yeah. Well, did you feel like you were at the cutting edge? As in, relatively speaking, obviously, as a BSc student, you're not, someone that's done a PhD and 5 years down the line where you're working professionally. That's going to be someone, in a different stage. But was it an introduction into cancer? What was it like overall?
Yeah, so I thought, so when you started to speak, I thought the question was directed as like, what's the workload like? Is it difficult, type of thing? But I guess that there's also the aspect of, is it at the forefront? Are you learning about old stuff, or are you really at the pinnacle of research? Are you the frontier of cancer? Okay, the first one on workload, I thought it was calm. Like, my personal experience was that the BSc year was the most chill year of medical school that I had so far, and that was really nice. I think a lot of it's to do with the way that the course is designed, so you don't have any exams in fourth year. Everything is done through write-ups, through in-course assessments, and then you have a big project at the end. So you've got a lot of time in between where you have things like lectures, but you're not tested on that knowledge directly. It's relevant in the sense of having an assessment and having write-ups, but you're not tested on it. There's no exams. So you can turn up to lectures, or you cannot turn up to lectures. But if you do turn up to lectures, you can sit back and you can just relax. You can just enjoy the content, which is different to like first and second year, where you've got notes and you're just writing furiously and trying to absorb all of the information and learn all of the specific details that might come up. So it's, the workload's calm from that aspect. It massively, if I was to draw a graph, I'd say the workload's like down here, and then every 3 to 4 weeks you have a nice CA, and then it just spikes up for a week, and then you got like another 3-4 weeks to recover, and then the next ICA drops. So it happens in like peaks, but on the whole, it balances to be really calm. In terms of what it is that you learn, my personal BSc, it was pretty cutting edge. We learned a lot about background science of cancer, but then we started to learn about new treatments, new things that are on the horizon. We had a couple of lecturers coming in who were, to be honest, some of the top of their field. And Imperial as an institute is very research focused. So I would say that we've, as a hub, as a center, we've got some really great access to a lot of scientists who are top of their field. When it came to my BSc project, I think most of the projects are all new stuff. You're not really doing something that's been done before. So I was doing a piece of research which hasn't been done. I was doing a study in a cancer which, this study had not been done in this type of cancer. It was the first study of its kind. So it was very cutting edge in that aspect. And I think that what you end up is, you've got, let's say there's like 15, 20 people in your year, in your BSc pathway. Each of those 20 people will do a project in a very specific area, but it will be world leading in their specific area. So I did mine in the field of microbiota and its interactions with immune checkpoint inhibitors. And it was really at the forefront and cutting edge in that field. In the wider scale of, cancer, it's not some world-breaking, like new research. I haven't discovered a cure for cancer or anything big like that. But in the field that I've got, it's like the latest piece of research. So it's cutting edge, but within a very specific niche. So you end up being an expert in a really particular niche.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I guess the reason I asked that is just because I guess, I mean, I would imagine, I hope, like, if there's anyone that's younger that's watching this, that's like doing sixth form or something, and is coming to Imperial next year, or wants to come to Imperial next year, or soon after, like, I think of like universities are meant to be like places where it really is like, you know, it's challenging, it's engaging, like it shouldn't be like A levels, for instance, where, you know, you're just learning about something from a book. And let's face it, I think most people just do a lot of past paper questions, learn the answers, and you're okay. I mean, at the end of the day, it comes down to like how much you push yourself and what you make of the opportunities. And I realized whilst we were talking, the same is true for university as well. Like, it can be a very sort of like just learn everything, the course, and just get through it and pass. Or if you want it to be more, it can. But Imperial is like a huge, like you said, brand for research. It's known for its research, and it's nice to know that there are cutting edge things happening as well. If people want to go, you know, sort of down that route, because I think that is an important part of university, that it not just be, but it's down to everyone. Everyone has their own sort of take on it. Okay, that was super interesting. So I feel like we've got a good gist of like what the last 6-7 years have been like, kind of like, you know, going from sixth form. You said you were interested in computing. That I thought that was really interesting as well, because that's one BSc I know that Imperial don't. Well, they offer one that's like AI or machine?
Not to my knowledge, no, not at the moment. They've got surgical design, technology, and innovation. That's probably the closest, but nothing directly computing.
Yeah, I mean, I would be interested if they'd done a BSc where it was like AI and machine intelligence and how that's going to influence medicine. I think they've done remote medicine, which might be a new one. I don't know if it's for this year or last year, but
yeah, it was the first time it was run was last year. Yeah. And that's pretty cool, because that's like medicine in different situations. So you've got like modules on like space medicine, like desert medicine, jungle medicine. It's pretty cool. I didn't know there was space medicine. That sounds quite appealing. So fair enough. Okay, right, before we sort of go into the bulk of the role that you've been doing, because it's been a huge role, like we said initially, you've taken a whole year out to do this, and I think you've done a really good job, because given the circumstances, everything's run really, like, as a first year, like my experience of the union has been like, it's been really smooth. Like, it's just great. The good thing is it's just not kind of come up in the forefront for any negative reason. So that means that you're doing the things that need to be done, which is what you'd hope for. So yeah, we'll start there. Not doing a bad job.
No, you're not doing a bad job. So yeah, so that's great. Okay, so my first question, I think probably like the most important one for all students that are watching is, like, you've obviously been the president. I know that we'll come to this later. Were you treasurer in a previous year as well?
A couple of years ago, yeah, I was the management group clubs and stocks treasurer.
Okay, and have you also been involved with Muslim medics as a president, or am I?
Yeah, that's true as well. I did that last year.
Okay, so a slight overachiever here. That's because that is an overachievement, because it's so hard to get into these roles. So that's going to be a question a little bit later on. But anyway, so you've got some experience of societies and unions and stuff, like you've been involved. So is there anywhere on campus where we can get free coffee?
Oh God, no, you're testing me. So I know where you could have. So when the library, over Easter, when the library cafe was shut, they set up like a little coffee machine thing in Sherfield. Okay. I don't think there's any way, I mean, I know we can buy coffee. There's like a vending machine in SAF. There's like the library cafe. There's like cafes and stuff around. I don't know about free coffee.
Okay. Well,
I think if there was, I'd know about it.
Okay, so maybe there isn't. Yeah. Okay, or people know and they've just disclosed that information very well. Okay, right. Okay, so we'll start with the fact that obviously you've been, like, as you said, you've been involved with Muslim Medics as a president, a treasurer as well, and president of this really big role. But for students that want to kind of be involved in the union going forward, it is quite competitive because I know, like, some of my friends and myself included applied for roles this year that we didn't get. Um, are there, like, what do you do, like, the top down view? How do you get into a position where people are going to vote for you and you're going to get in? Like, what did you do? What's your
There's no like Illuminati inner circle stuff basically.
there's
I
no
think
secret Facebook group where if you put our name in, you know, millions
if
of
there is, I'm not in it, and
okay,
therefore shouldn't be in this position.
okay,
Yeah, I mean, so I've always been an active person in
yeah,
terms of getting involved with stuff. I've actually, I mentioned before, I always love volunteering. I love helping people. I love doing roles. And so, from first year, I was an academic rep in my first 2 years. So I did it 2 years in a row. And I think for the role of president, for me, it always felt like all of the previous experiences I had were all slowly coming together. And each year at medical school, I was slowly zooming out and out in terms of the roles that I was doing. So you start off, in what I would call a grassroots role on the ground. And then you slowly move up to oversight type roles, and then you slowly start to move up. So, I was an academic rep in my first 2 years at Imperial. In my second year, I remember I just did so many different grassroots type of roles. I mean, I was on I had at least 10 positions. I just really took it and ran with it. And so I had, I was on loads of different societies, different roles like secretary, publicity officer. I was a treasurer. And that was really, that was good because it meant I was able to do a lot of grassroots stuff, have impact on individual societies and do individual roles and start to gain a lot of experience. And then the next year was when I ended up going for more of an oversight role. So again, you start zooming out. So I was management group treasurer of the SU. And that basically means you're in charge of all of the clubs and society finances. You oversee all of the treasurers. You deal with any problems and issues they have. You represent them to ICU. And so that was, zooming out. I did the role of the treasurer on the ground. I took it, I ran with it, I gained all of that experience and did it to my max. And then the next year, it allowed me to step into a role where now I could oversee the new sets of treasurers and presidents who were coming in. And, it was the same in societies. You mentioned I was on the committee. Even in first year, I was helping out a lot, went on the committee, had a couple of years, started to zoom out and to develop that experience, have more of the oversight of people. And then, as president, the role is basically you're not there to do stuff. You're there to facilitate and help other people to do stuff. And so over the years, you start off small and then you start zooming out more and more. And you start to develop bits of experience. You start to develop experience of overseeing people, facilitating people. And then, eventually you kind of, I almost think of it like climbing up a ladder. You don't just go from the bottom and jump to the top, but you slowly develop experiences that allow you to kind of start to climb it. I've rambled on for a bit, but hopefully there's something that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so I guess what you're saying is that the fact that you started small and slowly, as you said, zoomed out and had a bigger picture view over the years, and the fact that in the initial years that you had been on the lower down places gave you context as well as you went up. So yeah, and yeah, I agree. I can't see someone not ever having been involved in the union or any society suddenly in third or fourth year deciding that they're going to be president. Yeah, and I don't think. Yeah, sorry, go on.
It usually happens when you're in fifth year, I mean, the youngest president that comes to mind was a fourth year. It usually is 50 years. There's people who take a break between fifth and final year who do it. So it's really when you're right at your very peak in terms of your experience, your knowledge of ICSM, of society as a ICU, the faculty.
Yeah.
That's when you do it. So yeah, it tends to be later on as opposed to earlier.
Okay, yeah. I get okay. The aspect that I wanted to explore a little bit further was sort of the nitty-gritty of getting the votes. So, is it that you just write excellent manifestos? Like what? Because I actually don't know. Because for me, like I think I did I volunteer for academic rep. I think I did earlier on, right in the beginning of first term. But it was literally just I wrote my manifesto, and like I was not gonna go and like ask people to vote or anything. I know people do it to get votes, but you're obviously someone that's been, elected for quite a few different roles. So what's the nitty gritty? Like, what are you doing so well that people are voting? Is it just what is it?
It's I don't think there's any I don't think there's a particular formula. I think that a lot of it ends up being experience, and I don't want to say, reputation's the wrong word, but doing particular roles, doing them well means people put trust in you to do other roles. So, I remember when I was academic rep, um, ran for it in first year. It's the first time that you're ever running for a role. Nobody really knows anyone.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it does come down to the manifesto, to your ideas. I mean, I remember I just took it and ran with it. I made a website, which, just went into all of my experience, and I threw everything at it. And so then I had the role of the year one academic. Well, in those days, it wasn't academic and well-being. It was a joint rep role. So I was the year rep for first year along with two other students. And again, in that year, we ended up doing a lot. We pushed for lots of changes. We had this big module for society and health. We had lots of meetings with the course lead, and we ended up, that module ended up being removed from a summative examination. The e-modules and things were totally redeveloped, put in new support sessions for certain assessments. So people can obviously start to see the outcomes and what happens. You've been in a role, they'll quickly decide whether they feel like you've done a good job or a not so good job. And so when it came to a year two academic rep, again, it just meant that people knew me as a candidate. I guess to some extent, they could see I had the experience of having done the role before. They could see some of the outcomes from having held it. So that's what I mean when people start to trust you to do things. Even when I was a treasurer of the society, again, I put my all into it. I got some good results. Our income went up. We got new sponsorship deals. And so when it came to running the management group treasurer, again, people were either familiar, they could see my experience, the sorts of outcomes I'd had in the past. I think a lot of it did come down to, I had the experience of being a treasurer on the ground. I knew, what it took. And I think it's almost like a snowball effect in that sense. At the start, you do have to push yourself to do roles. You have to be able to come up with quite a clear vision, good ideas, things that people can get behind, particularly people who don't know you, especially if you're against someone who maybe people do know, being able to demonstrate what your experiences are, what your ideas are, what your unique selling points are. And then, it snowballs. So in later roles, people know you, they know off you, they know some of the things you've done, some of the work you've done. And so if anything, I would say it gets easier. I mean, if I was to go, for example, for like, I don't know, a role, which is, let's say I was to go for a treasurer role of a society, I think that very clearly people would be able to see my name, see my experiences automatically, know the sorts of stuff I've done in the past. And so it'd be very easy to get it. But if I was a first year, nobody knew who I was, what experiences I had. I'd have to push a lot harder in order to sell my experiences, sell my manifesto in a way that you maybe don't have to do in later years.
Okay. And are you saying to push harder via writing, like going all out with the manifesto and really going into depth with your ideas? And
I mean, putting
a website as well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the website, that was just me going a bit extra, to be honest with you. I mean, most people don't do websites and stuff like that. I think I was just bored more than anything. I think it's just making sure that you're able to sell your experiences and that you can come up with a clear vision and set of ideas, which are things people can get behind, which are realistic. And that's what I think draws a lot of people in.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I guess so. What you're saying is, like experiences count. I guess one thing is try to build some experience, or at least the experiences that you have had. Try and communicate them very well. When you're doing it, I feel like you're kind of saying to if you're a first year, you might need to push a little bit further because people won't know who you are or necessarily have had that exposure to you. And down the years, as you do more, that people will gain trust in you, and that will help. Um,
Yeah.
okay,
And
yeah,
don't overshoot. I mean, if you're a first year, I think be realistic in your own competencies as well. I mean, as a first year, you wouldn't go for a president of the society if you don't know, you don't have much history in that society. You don't know how it runs, how it functions, what events run, and how things work. So you'd probably want to start off as, you know, maybe a general committee member, maybe doing like a really on the ground role. And then once you've got that experience, then you can start to climb the ladder and go into more oversight type roles, and then to positions like vice president and president in later years.
sure, yeah. No, I think that's a very mature way of looking at it. I mean, the thing is, like, for first year students and like new students that are coming in, like, I think the impression that you'll get is that what the impression that I got anyway is there's a lot of dark arts to like in my head I just have this image of like there are like some students in first year, for example. I won't name any. Actually, there's no particular student I'm thinking of, but
Yeah.
just the idea that people going around like, please vote, just vote for me, just like it's right here, just press it, whatever. Because I know that people do ask each other for votes and stuff, and that's fine. Like it's not a big deal or anything. But I like the way that you've explored it from the perspective of actually it's not a lot about popularity at all. It's more about communicating your experiences and trusting that
Yeah.
people will see that you're capable to do that role.
Yeah.
And they'll vote
I
for
mean, when you're a first year, people tend not to know you. I mean, the elections happen right within pretty much the month that you join. And
you.
so a lot of people naturally won't know you. I mean, people do go around with an iPad or a phone and say, you know, vote for me,
Yeah,
which, you know, it's part of campaigning, I guess.
yeah,
And albeit, you know, that's obviously an extreme pushy version of getting votes.
yeah,
But that, even if people do that, that's not enough for you to get a vote. I mean, if you don't have a profile picture up and you don't have a manifesto that's written out, in my experience, it's the candidates who display passion, who display experience, who display ideas are the ones who get positions, regardless of going around and asking for votes and doing that kind of campaigning.
sure. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, we'll move forward from the campaign because I think you shared a lot of good advice there. And for anyone that wants to run for positions, hopefully you've been something. Okay, so how obviously this year's been COVID, which going into this role, were you expecting COVID to be still around this late into the year?
I don't think
Well,
anyone was.
yeah,
I mean, when COVID first came out, I think most people were like, oh, this will be a fad for a couple of months, maybe June time it will die out. I mean, it gets to June and then you're like, okay, it's staying for a little bit. By September, it will be gone. You get to September, it's well, by freshers, it will disappear. And then you get to freshers and then you're like, oh, by January, that will be when things are back to normal. You get to like December, January, and you're like, yeah, this isn't going away.
yeah,
So no, I expected it to be. I expected that obviously COVID would be around. I expected that it would stay for a bit of time, and I knew that that time would obviously be very difficult because there's a lot of work that has to go into even keeping the ship afloat when
yeah,
you've got a global pandemic going on. But I don't think I expected it would last this long, and I did expect that I didn't expect we'd be having this conversation over Zoom back in, when I got the role, basically.
yeah.
I would have expected that things would have started to get back to normal. But obviously, you very quickly realize that it's here to stay.
Yeah. As your current president, obviously, I imagine you've had like quite a lot of contact with faculty throughout the year. In my head, I always imagined it as you going in to South Kensington or whatever and being there and talking. But now I think about it, has it been a lot of Zooming? Like,
It's all been Zoom. I mean,
yeah,
most of the people in faculty, I haven't seen them in person all year. There's people who, I know I've spoken to, I speak with, and I've never seen them in person.
yeah,
It's weird in that sense. I mean, I've had a few interactions in person when it came to Freshers Fortnight.
yeah.
Obviously the welcome talks and things were in person, but 99% of it has all been virtual and over Zoom or Teams.
Are there any sort of interactions with any faculty members that you have very good memories of? I mean, any faculty members that you love, Muntaha, anyone that stands out that you've enjoyed working with? I mean, who are like the key ones that you sort of collaborate with as part of the student union?
I love them all. They're all amazing.
Good answer.
Well, yeah. No. I think that it's interesting where my role sits. A lot of people assume that everything gets run past me and I'm a member. Some people assume I'm a member of the faculty, when in reality, the SU is separate to the faculty. And I really get involved with, I guess, I've had a lot of interactions with what I would call the leadership group. So these are the So we have these meetings called Cobra, for example, where we discuss our COVID response. We discuss how, what the mood of students is on the ground, what we need to do to mitigate COVID, any specific concerns that are coming up. And so, that group tends to be people like the Vice Dean for Education, Martin Lupton, the head of ICSM, Amir Sam. There's a lot of what I would divide faculty into the external facing faculty, who are the ones that everybody knows, the people who teach lectures, the people like, Mary Morrell, Mike Emerson, James Moss, who you're probably familiar with, and then the internal faculty, who are the people that you don't really see, you don't interact with, but they're the people who are behind the scenes doing things, overseeing things. And I've got a lot of interaction with a lot of those people. And yeah, some of them, well, they're all great. And, some of them I've really got on well with. But I think it's also been, it's a weird relationship, because it's also been, I think this year on the whole has been a very different and difficult and overall a very lonely year, because normally you would see people in person, you'd be going to meetings, and there's always that 15 minutes at the start where you're mingling around with people, and then at the end of the meeting, you maybe stay around and chat with people. Maybe in the FVO offices, you might walk in, you might bump into people and have a quick impromptu catch up. Yeah. Whereas this year, when it's Zoom and when it's Teams, you don't have any of that really. You join a meeting and you join at the time of the meeting. You join at 2 o'clock or whatever time, and then it's straight into the agenda, professional mode, get through the action points, bang, bang, bang. And then at the end, no one waits behind. You click leave meeting, and then that's the end of it. So it's weird, because a lot of the interactions you have with people are in this really formal setting, and you get to see the professional side of people, but then the personal side, the day-to-day interactions. I mean, you get a bit of that when you have small group meetings or one-to-one meetings with people, but I think it's been weird, because that's the part that's really been lacking this year, just because of Teams and Zoom and the way that the year's played out.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess, I feel, not sorry, but I understand what you're saying, that there's a little bit there that you miss out on, with it being, but at the same time, I mean, everyone everywhere has their experiences have been changed because of COVID, right? Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I guess, okay, so there's one thing in my mind, it's just gone out of my head now. It was a good question as well. It was something I was quite curious about.
We'll cut here, and then when you remember, you will like spring back up, and it will look.
No. So right in the beginning when you were saying it's you'll edit it or whatever. That's the thing I was going to tell you. There's no editing that happens. Whatever we say goes online almost immediately. So okay. Right. Let me see if it will come back to me.
Well, I'm glad I did say what faculty members I like and don't like.
Nothing was going to be cut. Yeah, that was a good answer. Okay, I think it's just come back. Okay, so Do you think this? I'm just. I don't know if you are necessarily in a position where you'd have any more information about this than anyone else. But I'm going to ask you anyway because I'm curious. Do you think the way that COVID has happened and the fact that obviously everyone's medical course has changed quite a bit, like from first through to fifth year, through sixth year. I mean, imagine everyone in every year has had a different experience of what this year for them has been like than what it would have been like in the past. Um,
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I mean,
yeah,
some years have had it more differently to other years. So,
yeah,
for example, in the clinical years, placements are still taking place. People are still going in. I mean, they've looked different. A lot of consultations have been online as opposed to in person,
yeah,
but they've still had, that in-person interaction.
yeah,
Whereas if you take something like the BSc year, that's been fully remote, and you've had people who haven't even been into the UK, who are international students who have just been logging in every day. And phase 1A and 1B, needless to say, a lot of work behind the scenes.
yeah,
The faculty have put in to keep it running as best as possible. And a lot of the skills-based content that you have been in person, but a lot of the knowledge-based content has actually shifted onto online, onto things like Zoom and Teams. So I think that, yeah, everyone's had it differently, but some have had it more differently.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess my question was like, with your experience with faculty, do you imagine that is it a case that like once this all hopefully goes over with COVID, like will we revert back to what it was like previously, or are they going to keep some of the things in place? For example,
Yeah. Yeah.
online exams. Like, is that something they might consider keeping in the long term, or no?
I mean, I don't actually know the real
Yeah.
answer to this. I don't know what the faculty kind of at the top have planned in their minds, but I hope that a lot of the stuff does stay. I mean, the days of having to go into Brian Drew Lecture Theatre to have 300 people in a room and to have some lecturer sitting at the front reading off a PowerPoint slide, that's the sort of thing where I think that translates really well to online settings. And I personally think that anything which has more than 100 people in a room should be done online, even meetings. I mean, the SSLGs we've run this year, where you'd normally have in excess of 70, 80, the BSc one over 100 attendees, it's worked a lot better online. So I think that those sorts of things should stay online. I
Yeah.
think that some things can't really be done online. So anatomy, for example, clinical placements, I don't think that you can make that online. You can't examine a patient or, do an anatomy, like dissect a cadaver over Zoom. It's just not possible, not at the moment anyway. But I think that's the areas where technology can complement learning. So for example, there's been some pretty cool stuff this year with the HoloLens, which the faculty have done for third years. And that's been a case where online has kind of complemented as opposed to replaced the more traditional modes of learning.
Yeah.
So I think that's how I kind of see it. I see the didactic, more than 100 people type of learning. I think that should stay on Zoom, that should stay on Teams. It's easier all around for students and for staff. And you've had people who have been able to deliver lectures from other countries and international speakers who've been able to reach out, which you wouldn't normally have. And then, the other skills-based stuff, I think it's difficult to see how online could kind of try to replace that. So I think that, yeah, there's going to be, I hope there's going to be a new normal. And I think it's going to look a lot like the old normal, but with a lot of the bigger didactic type teaching to be online as opposed to in person.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And I'd agree with that. I think yeah, like when there's like a 300-person lecture theatre, and if the lecturer it's just reading off like a bunch of slides, not to say that the lecturers don't like you obviously have the opportunity to ask questions, and a lot of times they give context and stuff, which I totally appreciate, but I feel like the trade-off of having to go into the lecture versus do most of that online and be at home or in halls, then
yeah. I mean, how have you found it this year? Because a lot of your stuff's been online, but you've also had a few in-person interactions. And obviously you can't compare to what a normal year has been.
Yeah.
But objectively looking at it, how have you found all of the online stuff?
I mean, I think it's been a really good balance. I think most of the online stuff has been delivered really well. I think when it's online, you do notice that some teaching is better delivered, I have to be honest, than other teaching. So there are some modules. For example, I'd say, I know you, I don't know why we mentioned endocrinology earlier. I think you said one of your friends done it as a BSc. But endocrinology was really, really well put together. That's not to say some of the others weren't, because a lot of them were. For example, I thought cardiorest was for us quite well put together as well. It's just when they're not as well put together, it's very obvious because it's all there online and you can just compare, like like, oh, that's like makes a lot of sense. And yeah, so I think it's in that way. So when the teaching's really good, it's A plus. Obviously, the fact that you can rewind and stuff is really, really great. You can get context. I can pause a lecture and look something up online if I don't understand something. Whereas in a lecture, obviously, if the lecturer is talking and sometimes they're talking very quick, you can't pause, and because once you're 5 minutes behind, that's it. That lecture's gone. Like you're not gonna get most of what's going on. I think they've got, I don't know if they planned this or if it's just luck, but I think the faculty, the first years anyway, have got a very good balance. Like we've only been in for anatomy teaching. Even with that, it's only been when it's been dissection. Well, not, they said, well, it's dissection, but it's actually prosection for us. So we don't have dissection anymore, which is another thing. Like I didn't think I was missing out, but I was talking to one of the fourth years the other day, and she mentioned that when you guys are in the dissection room, you have scalpels and stuff, and you're kind of, yeah, and we're just there. We obviously put on the apron and everything, but we don't get given any tools. We're just observing mostly.
Looking and
Yeah. So now I do feel a little bit like I'm missing out, but yeah.
I mean, dissection was a bit useless, if I'm going to be totally honest with you. I mean, my experience of dissection was you stand around a table for a couple of hours while someone does most of the cutting. You might occasionally get to, cut the odd thing.
Yeah.
And then the end result never looks anything like it's supposed to. And then they pull out the prosection anyway, which is a lot better. And none of that stuff was ever linked to our exams. So all of the dissection stuff, it just felt like you do it for fun. And when the initial novelty wears off, then you just sort of stood around a table for a couple hours. And I found it pointless. So, you're not missing out on much in my experience.
Okay. Yeah, that makes me feel a little bit better because I guess, yeah, it comes down, like some people will love it and some people won't. So it's not necessary that if one person loves it doesn't mean that it's great, yeah, for everyone. Okay, fair enough. Okay, yeah. So I think they've got a really good balance. So we've had dissection room teaching that's been in person, clinical anatomy where I don't know how you differentiate that from the gross anatomy. It's like when we talk about like when we talk about the theory of anatomy, I guess. So some of that has been, I didn't explain that very well, sorry. But the clinical anatomy sessions, any first year watching will know, have been in person. And then lab sessions. So when we've done like labs for like electrophoresis and spectrophotometry and stuff, that's been, some of them have been in person. And they've done it well in terms of like anatomies every 2-3 weeks. So every 2-3 weeks, we'll have one day where we all get to go in and see each other in person. So it does feel a little bit like you do kind of, you remember faces and you get to see your friends and stuff. So yeah, overall, I've really liked it, to be honest. Like I if all of the online stuff that we done this year was all in person, I think it would be a bit much. And I don't know necessarily that it would have been that much better as well. I mean, yeah, you can ask questions after the lecture finished, but we have forums and stuff where we can ask questions. And most questions, to be honest, as a first year, you can probably look up online and figure out, or ask like a second or third year. I mean, there are very few things that we're going to ask that are that deep that we need like the world expert there to sort of break it down. I mean, I don't think I even have enough understanding to ask questions like that. So yeah. Yeah, I don't. But again, that's just my opinion. I don't know. Other people might be like.
Sounds like they've got a good blend, but yeah, that's good to hear.
Okay, the weather was really nice, so I'm really sorry that I kept you in.
No, it's fine. I'm not planning on going outside anyway. Right. You're just keeping me from emails, which is a good thing. So let's keep it going.
Right. Okay. Okay. In that case, right. One thing I would like to know. So, what's been one? This is a very typical question, but what's one thing you've really enjoyed in your role? what's one thing that you might have found challenging that, like, is there anything you would have done different, I guess, whilst you've been in this role?
Yeah. I think that this role, if I was to define it, I would say it's, if people ask me, is this a fun role? Is it enjoyable? I would say no, it's not. If people ask me, is it a worthwhile role? Then I'd say yes, it is. So that's what I really like about this role, is essentially helping people. You're basically a voice for students. You're able to, sit on a lot of various different committees and things like that. And, there's something in it being that kind of privilege to be that elected representative of students in all of these different meetings. And, it's a role where you always put a lot of work in. You often don't really get much recognition because most of the work you do is behind the scenes and doesn't always have clear action points and tangible things that you can see and you can feel. But it's it's all of the smaller stuff. It's like when a student emails and you help them with something, when a student has a problem and you fix it, or you direct them to where they need to go to fix it. And when you get those messages of thanks and people who come to you, they need your help and you're in a position to support them, I think that's the bit that really makes it all worthwhile. And then I think that the thing with the role is that it is a difficult role. I mean, it's not easy, and I don't want to I don't want to give the usual spiel of it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. I would say that it's always both. It's a marathon, and there's times every so often where you have to sprint. I think particularly this year, there's just been a lot of big things that have happened throughout the year. The move of the MDLs, for example, is one of the big things. And, there's been a lot of instances where, you get calls from students who are really desperate for help and they really need, help with whatever it might be. And so it's, you often, you'll be on the phone with students for long hours, right through till the night. And, I think that side of things is obviously, it's very intense. And I think that it definitely takes a lot out of you. And I think that that's the one thing where I think that a lot of it's just been the way that this year has gone, where a lot of the fun parts of the role, stewarding at Freshers Fortnight, seeing the SU in person, having team bonding days and being invited to like award ceremonies and events, none of that stuff's happened. But all of the difficult parts of the role, all of the work, all of the emails, the worried students and anxiety, and all of the difficult bits of the role have just been amplified, and it's been amplified by quite a bit just because of COVID. And so I'm the sort of person where if the work needs doing, I'll make sure that it gets done. And I think that if I was to do something a little bit, it's difficult because I know I wouldn't do it differently. I mean, there's been instances where the government out of nowhere have come up with an announcement. We had a whole Freshers Fortnight plan in place. The government popped up and said, okay, actually we're reducing numbers from 30 to 6 people. There's been surprise announcements for another lockdown, tier 4 for example, which happened right at the start of Christmas, and threw everything out of NAP. It's those moments where I think the responsibility is really on you as the SU president to make sure that students are getting the help and support they need. They've got the information they need. It's up to you to go out there and to seek it, whether it's having interactions with the faculty, whether it's with the college, in some cases even ringing up the government to try to get an answer and get some clarity on things. I think that a lot of that, it takes a lot out of you, and it's very kind of intensive. And I think that a lot of the resources and a lot of the energy has been in just trying to keep the ship afloat as much as possible. And I'm really glad that things have started to die down a little bit now, because it also means that I can start to focus on some other projects and some other things that I want to work with, as opposed to having to just, deal with COVID, try to keep everything afloat, try to, make sure that all students out there are well supported, that they're getting the help and support they need. So I guess that there's those two aspects. It's not enjoyable, and it takes a lot out of you, and it's very intensive. I've previously said to others that it's not a job. My role isn't a 9 to 5 job where I start at 9, I finish at 5 p.m. and I clock off and that's it. It's a 24/7 responsibility. You can get a phone call from someone at any point in time, whether it's 7 in the morning, 11 in the evening. So it's not enjoyable in that sense, but it's very worthwhile. It's very, at the end of it all, you have a real affection for the work that you do when you see people benefiting from it, when you see, people kind of coming back and showing gratitude, and that you have made a real difference and a real impact on people. I think that's what really makes it all worthwhile and worth it in the end. And that's been, probably the best moments.
Yeah, thank you. That was a really good insight into. I think I could have asked other questions about the role, but just within that conversation, I think you can glean a lot about what it's been like overall. I guess it's not always easy to draw the line between like taking care of yourself, and because this is a career, like medicine, obviously bringing it back to medicine, is a career of service to patients. But like taking care of your own health and your own mental health is really important as well. And it's interesting you say that, that a lot of the good parts of the role maybe they obviously haven't taken place in the way that they normally would. And those moments are important because they help to lighten what's otherwise clearly a role with a lot of responsibilities. I guess one question I would ask is, like, bringing it back to medicine, like, are there things that you feel that you're going to take away from this year that will apply well to when you're a doctor in the future in clinical medicine?
Yeah, and for sure. I mean, so in the short term, I think that a lot of this year has been about providing stability. But at the same time, I think that what we've really done well this year is that actually, despite everything that's gone on with COVID, we've really been able to push on all of our manifestos, all of our action points. And we've actually gone a lot further than in other years. And we've introduced and done more things despite everything that's been going on. And so in the short term, I think the things I'm really happy and proud of are all of the long-term changes and long-term improvements, whether it's, liaising with the Alumni Association and trying to rework, the way in which they work, introducing more funding for clubs and societies with, new sources of funding, rewriting our brand identity, how the SU kind of runs and functions, our kind of, our even things like the website, the newsletter, our communication strategy, which were all things that I really wanted to revamp and redo. A lot of that stuff I'll be able to benefit because it benefits all students. And I think that there's that direct benefit of, after this year, given, all of the different things that we've done this year where, we've gone further than ever. I think that as a student, you'll still benefit because they directly relate to the student experience. And I think beyond that, looking more at the soft skills side, I think that there's always, things that you take away. I think that dealing with uncertainty is probably the biggest thing. It's a massive part of being a doctor. And this year there's been loads of uncertainty from start to end. There's been, surprise announcements that pop up and suddenly your phone's flooded and you're getting phone calls from students asking you loads of questions. And, at the start, it's like your adrenaline's pumping, that everyone's going to come to you. You've got to, you find out about these things at the same time as everybody else. And so it's up to you to work through it, to figure out how things are going to affect you and students. And then, we've had I remember in Christmas, for example, we ended up having regular Cobra meetings throughout Christmas, just to try and deal and work through everything that the government was announcing and what was a really rapidly changing situation.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, there's been loads of different instances of that where it's been big announcement, need to work through it, need to, be on the ground ready to speak with students to figure out what's going on. And by, the first 1 or 2 times adrenaline's pumping, by the next couple, it's just here we go again, is how it feels. I mean, I remember when the lockdown, so we had another lockdown in November, you might remember. And I remember when that announcement came, I just kind of got up off my chair and went over to my laptop, and I was just like, okay, here we go again. We've already been through this like 3 times already. And so, it's needless to say, by the time things like tier 4 comes along, the national lockdown in January and everything else that's going on, you just become really immune to all of the uncertainty, to all of the adrenaline, to everything that's going on. You're just unfazed by it all, and you can just logically start to work through things. So I think that's the biggest thing. That's the biggest takeaway, because that's a big part of being a clinician, dealing with uncertainty. So yeah, that's probably the biggest takeaway that I'll hopefully take.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's a really good insight. Yeah. And I can completely sense where you're going with that. And of course, yeah, like obviously it's not the case in every specialty, but in a lot of specialties, there is more uncertainty than in others. And yeah, and dealing with what you've had to deal with this year as president, yeah, I feel will put you in good stead. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I did ask if there was anything that you would do different, and I think you said that you've pretty much there's not much you would change. You're not that kind of person that would go back and be like, no, I would have changed this or something like that. But obviously, there's things that you've learned, which I've gleaned as well. I don't know. I feel like that's, yeah. Is there anything that comes to mind for you that you want to talk about?
Not particularly. I mean, I think that a lot of the skills I developed previously from doing previous roles also really helped. I think I mentioned in second year where I had, 10 different roles at times. And a big thing I learned there was about time management. And all of that experience has really come together. I mean, this year has just felt like all of the previous experiences I've had right from year 1 as an academic rep all the way through the past kind of half a decade or whatever, all of the experience, but not just the knowledge, but also the skills, speaking with people, facilitating things, overseeing people, all of supporting people, all of those experiences have all, really come together this year, both for knowledge and also all of the more soft skills, like things like time management.
It's been a culmination of many years that, has come together to make you feel like you're ready for this role this year. Okay, yeah. I'm just curious, when does this role end? Like, when do you officially become not president?
So 1st August.
Okay.
1st of August. So I've still actually got a couple of months left. And in these last few months, I'm basically just going to go all out ballistic, just go, right, this is what I want to do. Let's just do all of these things in my last few months that I have. Yeah. And it's really weird because I go into 5th year, but 5th year starts, well, technically it starts on June the 28th. So there's also that overlap between me being a student again and also still doing this role concurrently. It will be interesting to see how that ends up playing out, but that's for future me to worry about.
Interesting. Okay. Are there any sort of you mentioned that you're going to go all out? Are there any 1 or 2 sort of big things that you're hoping to get done in the last few months of your time as president?
Yeah.
Just one big thing. Go on. Yeah.
One of the biggest thing, and it's been a consistent theme throughout, has been consultation and feedback. And I don't think that the faculty is doing good enough in those areas. I think that in the last few years, there's been a lot of decisions that have been made without adequate student consultation. The move of the MDL is the biggest one for this year, but there's also been other decisions which, it always seems to be the things that don't end up going well, of the things where the SU hasn't been consulted on. And I think there's a very clear correlation there. And we've also had confirmation that the faculty's ambition is to move medical students out of our home in SAF to the neighbouring RCS building. And when we asked the faculty explicitly, can you rule out this future move without student consultation. They couldn't do that. And so clearly there's a lot of work that we need to do to make sure that we can push this message of student consultation is important. We need to empower the student voice. And also from a side of feedback as well, I think that the feedback systems within ICSM have always been broken for as long as I've been here. I presented a paper at the very start of the year to the faculty's board, which unfortunately was rejected, but we've been able to kind of trial out this new mechanism with 50 years. I think on the whole, it's gone down very well. And so I'm hoping that we can kind of tweak things a little bit, use that experience we now have of piloting this new system, and then hopefully take it back to faculty, because the student voice at the moment is very underempowered. And I think that a lot of students themselves feel a little bit disillusioned with the faculty. As of right now, we don't feel like they're being heard or understood. And so I'm writing up a new consultation framework and hoping to really see if we can make some headway on this feedback system, which we tried to implement at the start of the year, and just seeing if we can really try to pick it back and get them on board with it. So I think that's two of the big ones which I'm really focused on, and hopefully I'll have something to show for it soon.
Okay. For context, if anyone's listening up to this point, well done. If you don't know, so what Muntaha is referring to there is the MDML labs they're being moved out of the Sir Alexander Fleming building, right? And yeah, the faculty have kind of just done it and not really asked the students for their opinion or seeked any kind of feedback or anything like that. Is that accurate to say?
Yeah, and the worrying thing for a lot of students, so I think there's three main areas of concern with this. One of them is around the consultation. So this isn't an isolated move. I mean, it was before your time, but last year there was the move of the St. Mary's Medical School building, the sale of the St. Mary's Medical School building, where it was a key part of our heritage, and college or whoever it was decided to sell this building, again, without consulting the student body. And there was a massive outcry, and there was, petitions went out, which got thousands of signatures. There was a big town hall event, and people made a very clear statement that decisions about us shouldn't be made without us. And so this has effectively come about in pretty much the exact same way as St. Mary's. But it kind of shows that clearly a message hasn't got through. A lot of the anger was external, but internally nothing within the faculty really changed or took good notice of that, or at least that's how it appears from where I'm sat. And that, it's not just this and St. Mary's. There's loads of previous decisions which have been made. The potential sale of the St. Mary's swimming pool, the sale of Teddington, the move of medic sports from Heston to Harlington. It's a really clear trend. There's a lot of concern with the decision itself. SAF is basically a central home and a hub of medical students. You may not have experienced it yourself just yet, but it's the sort of building where it feels as if it's the home of medical students. Everyone's in one place. It facilitates loads of social interactions, loads of day-to-day casual interactions. And I think there's a feel that maybe this is being seen as teaching space, but actually to us, it means more than just concrete walls and a lab. But actually it's about splitting our community across multiple different sites, which is really important for us as medics, because when we're on clinical placements, they're spread all over London in all different hospitals, as far out as Hillingdon, and some of the GP placements are everywhere. So after your second year, you're never a cohort again. And so having a central place that's your building, your home, is important to keep the community together. And there's also a lot of concern over the future. So the feeling of, when it was first announced, people basically said, well, is this part of the transition? Today, we're talking about the move of our labs into RCS. Tomorrow, are we going to be talking about the move of our lecture theatres and the rest of it? Which again is a move away from another piece of our key heritage, but also the RCS building is a closed space. It's not open floor. With SAF, it's open floor. You go in, lots of people are walking around, mingling. You've got the cafe, you've got breakout spaces and sofas. With the RCS, you walk in, the first thing you see is stairs. You go to a lab, you come out again. There's no bonding, there's no interaction that happens within the labs. And so there's concern over the future element, but we've now actually been able to get some clarity that at least we know that the faculty's ambition is that they plan to move medical students out of SAF entirely. So at least we have that clarity, and we know at some point in the future it will likely come about. But those are the kind of three buckets of student concern. I've gone off on a bit of a ramble but I've got a lot to say about it.
I remember when I read that in one of the newsletters. I mean, that made me feel a bit uneasy as well. And like you said, I think the start of that maybe was slightly before my time. So maybe it did start last year or in previous years. But I think I agree with you. Like the idea that, I mean, I get that changes happen, and like I'm not so much against, like, you do have to change with times, whatever. But the idea that it's done without any consultation of the people that it's most going to affect, that doesn't really sit well. And and I guess like to me, that's like what I imagine the role of the student union is. And as the president of the union this year, I'm glad, like, it's quite clear that you have strong feelings about it. And I hope that's filtered down through the union, and like it leads to a response. Because I agree with you. I don't think that faculty should just be able to, on a whim, even if they thought about it or whatever, like, we are an important stakeholder in that discussion as well.
No, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. You've articulated it really well. And, you know, I think the other aspect is, at the end of the day, the purpose of the SU is that only students can represent students. I don't consider myself to be a member of the faculty. The SU is itself its own charitable organization of student volunteers. And the only people who can represent students are students. So even when it comes to the faculty, and they may have done their own analyses on the space, there's a lot of other factors actually with this decision, where actually it's being done to build a new institute of infection and immunology, which is a research institute, as opposed to something more education focused. But I think that when you look at things through a really academic lens, it may well make sense. I mean, you're going to have a new lab. But to be fair, I think the current MDL labs are great. And if you ask most students, they've got no problems with them. But, you know, you'll get a nice shiny new lab, and it's great for teaching, and it's great particularly for phase 1 teaching. But actually, there's so much more to it than just the academic lens. And we as an SU and as students can see the whole holistic student experience. And we know that what goes into a space is not just how shiny the lecture theatre looks, but there's so much more beyond the kind of brick walls and the amount of floor space that you have. And so that's why, you know, only students are really in a position to understand the student experience as well as we do, and therefore to be able to represent and to be able to advocate for students. So yeah, you articulated it really nicely.
Thank you. Well, in that case, I wish you the best of luck with taking that up in the next few months. I know you said that that's one of your big goals in the final few months before August. So I hope you can make some headway there. And I'm sure, like, if there are any students watching, if there's an opportunity to participate, whether it's to sign petitions or stuff, like, I'm sure obviously people will make their own minds up, and that's absolutely fine. But yeah, like, we should get involved. And yeah. Yeah, I feel like that's quite a nice end to the conversation, because I feel like that's a big, like, part of what the student union is, and I'm glad that you're tackling that and you're taking that forward. Is there sort of any last thoughts? Actually, I have one question for you.
Go on.
We have exams next week.
I'm expecting a big one to end on.
No, this is completely personal and selfish, right? So, Muntaha, we have exams coming in a week or two. And you've done a lot of exams, medical school exams, because you're in 4th or 5th year now. So if there are any students watching, like, any last minute, like, brilliant ace revision tips that, like, if they're gonna fail, they're gonna listen to this and they're gonna pass, like, what can we do to just nail it?
Well, that's not pressurizing at all. I've got one more holistic bit of advice that I'll give, and that will be a really nice, cute thing to end on.
Sure.
In terms of revision tips, again, I think a lot of it comes down to time management. And what I would say is, what you tend to be used to is the old days of A-levels, where you whack out the CGP book and you write notes on it and you memorize it word for word, all the little dad jokes included, and then you just spew it out in the exam. When it comes to like medicine, what I found is that actually there's a lot more content, and you really need to make sure you're strict with the amount of time that you spend. You may not be able to learn absolutely everything about every little topic. Yeah. So you may not be able to learn the full kind of.
Sorry.
No,
sorry, I'm going to interrupt you, Muntaha. That was my dad. He just bought chips. So sorry.
No worries. I'll let you go.
No. We're not going to have chips. But sorry, carry on. I'm really sorry to interrupt. But
no, it's not a problem. But yeah, so you always want to have that feeling of, I want to be really comfortable and learn 100% of everything. But the reality is that, you know, I was always told it's better to learn 20% of 80% of the content than it is to learn 80% of 20% of the content. I.e., if you spend loads of time on all of the little details, you're going to run out of time. So what I used to do is I used to set myself a goal, and I used to say, I'm going to get through 3 lectures today, every single day in my like Easter holiday. I was going to do 3 lectures a day, and that would mean I cover everything. And there might be days where I spend loads of time on 2 lectures, and then the 3rd lecture, I don't have enough time to really look at it, but that's fine. What I'll then do is the next day, I won't spend time on that 3rd lecture. I'll actually go back to the, you know, I'll go to the next set of lectures. And if I get time to squeeze in and to understand that lecture I wasn't able to, then that's fine, I'll do that. But if not, you know, realistically, it's 1 or 2 marks that it might be in the actual exam. Yeah. You know, there's a really great quote from Abraham Lincoln, which is something along the lines of, if you give me 5 hours to cut a tree, I'll spend the first 4.5 hours sharpening an axe. In other words, if you give yourself that amount of time to do something which takes up that amount of time, you end up stretching that out across the whole thing. So you need to be strict with the time, basically. Give yourself as much time as what you need for a particular lecture. Have a clear goal or schedule in mind, and then just stick to it. That's the like on the ground, like practical bit of advice. The more holistic advice I was always given is that when you look at people in older years, you always, you know, if you look at a final year, you will probably see them as, God, these people are really great. I mean, when I was a fresher, there was people in like 4th, 5th year who I used to look at, and I used to think, God, these people are basically doctors now. Like the way they act, their mannerisms, the way they revise, they're really solid. But in reality, when they were in your same position, they weren't any better than you. And the marks that you get will probably be a lot higher than what some of these people will get. And all of these people went through the same struggles, the same problems, the same anxieties with revision and with exams. Yeah. And they were all able to get through it. And they were no smarter or better than any of you guys. And so if they can get through it, then I have zero doubt that everyone, you know, watching and all of you guys will get through it. Yeah. I was also in the same position. I was worried about exams. I didn't manage to finish some of my revision. There was lectures I didn't know about. I went into my exams feeling anxious. I came out of them in some cases feeling anxious. But when results came, it was, you know, it all was absolutely fine in the end. So everybody has to jump through the hurdles, and everybody does, however difficult it feels in the moment. And the other really specific point is it's really different to A-levels, where there's grades. In A-levels, you've got ace. Well, I don't know if is it like 9s and numbers and stuff now.
I think that's for GCSEs, but for A-levels,
okay, fine. But it's still A star. Okay, yeah. Good. So yeah, like A star, A, B, C. You know, you have grades, and those grades are based on how everyone else in the cohort does. Yeah. So like, if everyone finds the exam really easy and does really well, the A star grade boundary will be like 90%. And if everyone finds it terrible, it will be like 50%. Yeah. In medical school, firstly, there's no grades, but secondly, you're not competing against everyone else. The pass mark for your exams is already set. It's pass fail, and it's set based objectively on the exam itself. So it's not based on how everyone does. So technically, everyone can find the exam really easy. Everyone can get 100%. And if everyone gets 100%, it's never going to happen. But, you know, theoretically, everyone gets 100%. It means everyone passes. It's not a case of like a certain proportion has to fail. Everyone can pass. Everyone's in the same boat. And so you're not competing against everyone else. And I always found that really reassuring too.
Absolutely. I'm glad you clarified that actually, because it's funny you brought that up. That was like a question because a few of my friends WhatsApped me recently because they were going through, like, they done a mock recap. So we done our mocks, which it's another story. We don't get the actual mock papers, which was a big surprise. They don't obviously release the questions, which partly makes sense. Yeah, they don't, because I think they're from the same exam bank and they don't want, well, I guess they want to reuse them in future years. So I kind of get it. But also as a student, like, a part of the mock being useful is that I get feedback and know where I went wrong, so I can not do that again. Obviously, the only
did you not get feedback or like a mark back?
That's all we get back is a mark. So you know that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but like, what does a mark really like? Yeah, okay, I would have passed. I either passed or failed, but it doesn't like really tell you in terms of like, you know, where were you making a lot of the mistakes. They have, to their credit, they have broken it down a little bit. So they have broken it down into modules, like what percentage of the questions were from which module and how many of those you got wrong. But like, the things I want to know is like, there was this one particular question, I don't know the answer. I wasn't sure of the answer. I want to know what the answer to that question is.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting. It never used to be like that back in a long time ago in my day.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that's changed. I think it's definitely worth feeding back to your year reps, and maybe it's something that can come up at the SSLG on that like specific issue. But no, it's interesting that you bring that up. But yeah, go on. What was the wider point you were making?
Yeah. So I guess with what you were saying in terms of everyone can pass, it's not a pass fail. Like, I didn't really understand it. Now I think I do. I know that they like, people sit the exam before it's given to students, and they use people from loads of different departments. So you don't have like the cardio arrest people doing the cardio arrest questions, because obviously they will find them quite easy because they're the ones that are specialized in that. So I know that's the extent of my knowledge, but I think I'm a bit more clear on the fact that the mark is set before, and it's not determined afterwards, like after we sit it. Yeah, which is a good thing. Yeah, so everyone can pass. It's not. That's a really nice thing. I guess one last thing, because whilst you were talking, I think one thing occurred to me, which I thought I would bring up, is obviously there is a lot of pressure around exams, and I guess if anyone's dealing with like, if you're watching this now and you're like, oh shit, I'm gonna fail, whatever. If your mental health is affected, then do reach out like to people within the student union, because I know you're not the only sort of group that are there for students. You can reach faculty, friends, staff, whatever. But I remember you saying earlier in this conversation that you sort of had to be someone that's been available by phone any time of day, and if anyone needs anything, you're sort of, as the president, you're there personally to sort of talk through it with them. So I guess that's one thing I would say, because I can see that you're clearly quite passionate about that. So if anyone's watching this and it's really hard for whatever reason, then do feel like you can reach out.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm always here for independent advice. I'm totally separate to the faculty. So I'm just see me as like a student. And, there's loads of other bits of help and support. You've got your academic tutors who are all really great. You've got senior tutors. You've got the FEO welfare team. You've got the ICU advice center. You've got the student support zone in college. There's a lot of support available. So yeah, definitely reach out if any of you are struggling.
Great. I feel like that's a nice place to leave it. So I will say thank you, Muntaha, for your time. I'm sorry that you're going to have to go back and do emails now. I'm really sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, this has been a really interesting conversation for me personally, I'd say.
Thank you for having me as well. It's been a nice little chat and a nice way to break up my day a little bit. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, same. I mean, we're just revising all the time, so this is nice. It's like not revision. It's like fake work. I feel like it's work, but it's not really work. But yeah, I'm going to take some of your tips on board, though. I think next week I'm just going to focus on doing like working by time rather than spending all my time on one. Yeah, just get it all covered by the time the exams come around. If anyone watching has really enjoyed this or wants to talk to Muntaha, about anything, can they contact you, like if they're a student at Imperial?
Yeah, my email. So on the ICSM SU website, there's a contact page, and my phone number's on there, and also
I'll link
my
that page up.
email's on there. Yeah, so yeah, link it in the description or wherever it's going.
And if you guys have any questions for Muntaha, feel free to put them in the comments or just message him. I mean, like, it's funny because some of the questions that I was going to ask were going to be more like about what the student union, like, because I know there's like 3 or 4 different unions within the whole Imperial Student Union. Like ICSM one is one, but there's other ones like the engineering have their own.
Yeah.
But I guess if people are interested in that and you found this useful, then you can ask for like a part 2. And
yeah,
then
comment for a part 2.
part 2, yeah. Then Muntaha, if he has the
If
time,
it gets 300 likes, then we'll do a part 2.
I don't think it's going to get 300 views, but yeah, if it somehow gets 300
maybe
likes,
eventually. I'll come back in 10 years when it's finally hit it.
yeah, that's the goal. In 10 years' time, I'll re-invite you to do a part 2. So just click like, and in 10 years, you'll get the second part of this video. Right. Okay. Thank you.